and welcome back to the David67 Celtic News channel. Today's video going to be just looking at one or two issues regarding Brendan Rodgers' abilities at assessing players and transfers at his last three clubs, Celtic, Liverpool and Leicester. A couple of wee bits of news regarding players coming back from injury, with generally quite good news, and a couple of other wee Celtic related issues. Before we crack on, do have a wee think about clicking that subscribe button. Numbers going up little by little by little, which is jolly good, very encouraging. And also remember there's the like button, and there's also a comment section, and do love to read anybody's opinions and thoughts and theories regarding Celtic. Just going to start with the injury update that Brendan Rodgers gave yesterday. It appears that Dyson Maida, who was scheduled for return right at the very end of December, is probably a couple of weeks early on that, and so may even be back for the Feyenoord fixture, potentially, but certainly would appear to be back in contention to be in the games around Christmas, and then our big game against Rangers right at the very end of the year, and then St Mirren at the start of the year. Haven't seen any news regarding the Japan squad for the Asian Cup in 23-24, in 24. Haven't seen anything as yet for the Japan or South Korea or Australia squads for the 2024 Asian Cup that will be taking up all of January and the first 2 or 3 weeks of February next year, with quite a number of Celtic players potentially away for that. Would assume that Kyogo and Maida will be called up to that squad, but Hatate won't be, as it's not expected that Hatate will be back in training, back fit to play for Celtic until after the winter break, which would make him scheduled for back to first team action, possibly for the Scottish Cup match against Buckie on the 21st of January, or the couple of league fixtures at the end of January. Other good news is Leila Bada is back training on grass and seems to be a good month or so ahead of schedule, and so I suspect that he too will be returning to first team action probably after the winter transfer break, as I don't think Celtic will want to rush him back into the intensive fixtures around Christmas and New Year. It would appear that Marco Tilio, Gustav Lagerbielke and Mike Nawrocki are all fully fit, training normally, but all three seem to be in Rodgers' bad books, along with Tomoki Iwata, as Nawrocki, Lagerbielke can't seem to push Nat Phillips off the bench, even though Nat Phillips is only with us for another 3 weeks or so. But for some reason, Rodgers seems to prefer a player who's on his way out of Celtic in 3 weeks' time, rather than two young players for whom we spent around $7.5 million combined, both on long-term contracts, both at the start of their career, after very, very promising careers in Sweden and Poland. Lagerbielke, full Swedish international, and Nawrocki on the borderline for the full Polish squad, and yet Nat Phillips seems to be able to keep both of them off the bench, and For me, also, Scales and CCV are looking rather tired. Don't think CCV has been showing quite the same amount of pace in the last couple of matches. Didn't do a particularly a good job for me managing the one lone St Johnstone striker at the weekend, or coping when Stevie May came on to be a second forward for St Johnstone. And so I do wonder whether we should be looking to rest CCV either in the next match or the game against Kilmarnock, and I will address my planned team for the Hibs match in a video tomorrow morning, but there is a short version for those who want to see a preview of that. Other wee piece of news is Yosuke Ideguchi, who had 3 games for Celtic and then unfortunately had a bad injury and never saw first team action again under Postecoglou, no Rodgers. He's had an extremely successful loan season in Japanese football with Fukuoka, taking them to high up in the league and into the cup final and on the shortlist for Japanese Player of the Year. However, it seems that Rodgers has no intention of keeping Ideguchi at the club, and it looks like Celtic are looking to sell Ideguchi back to Fukuoka on a permanent deal, hopefully recouping some of the transfer fee, which was, from memory, around about 800,000. Does seem a bit disappointing that Ideguchi has a brilliant season in Japanese football, but yet doesn't seem to be even being given a chance to prove himself at Celtic, given the fact that Japanese season has now ended and won't be restarting for several months, and so it does seem reasonable to give Ideguchi, who's under contract to Celtic, a few months in training and the odd game to see whether he actually fits into the plans. However, Rodgers seems to be very keen to get rid of him and get rid of quite a few of the overseas players from the squad. I have seen a few other YouTube channels and internet Celtic fan sites speculating that Rodgers will be looking in the winter and summer transfer windows coming up to get rid of 10 to 13 of our current squad, replacing them with a few, inverted commas, quality signings. Rather confused and bemused to see that some YouTube experts have Gustav Lagerbielke and Mike Nawrocki on the way out of the club. It seems to be an extremely short-sighted view, because that would leave us actually very short of centre halves, given the fact that Phillips is away back on to Liverpool after a few more weeks. I think certainly little doubt that Yuki Kobayashi needs either sent off on loan, maybe back to Japanese football, maybe to upper level championship or lower half Premier League side in Scotland or England, to see whether he can get into first team football. Also, quite a lot of folk stating players such as Kwon, Tilio, Yang have absolutely no possible future at Celtic, when only of those Yang has had a few games, Tilio about 5 minutes or so against Motherwell, and Kwon 1/2 of a friendly right at the start of the season. A lot of people seem to also think that Lagerbielke is useless. Nawrocki is not much good either. I think Nawrocki was very impressive in the couple of games he had before injury. Lagerbielke was thrown in immediately into first team action because of all the injuries that we had. He hadn't even trained with Celtic, and yet he was starting a match. Then having to form a partnership with Liam Scales. I think they got better and better the longer they went on. Admittedly, Lagerbielke had a disappointing game against Feyenoord. Thought he actually defended really pretty well. I think he was unlucky with the first booking and unlucky with the second booking that gave away the penalty. And I think actually Lagerbielke is a player um, who is destined for bigger and better things. As I said earlier on, fully fledged Swedish international, even scored a goal playing for Sweden just a few weeks ago in the second international break. Nawrocki, I think, will be breaking into the Poland squad very soon. Lagerbielke and Nawrocki also bringing a bit more physical presence to the defence for crosses and long throws, etc. Um, and so I really would love to see Lagerbielke, Nawrocki starting a few matches and on the bench, particularly given the fact that Phillips is on his way out and Kobayashi, I think, also should be on his way out, along with people such as McCarthy and Burnaby. I think also, for me, Mikey Johnson should be out in the transfer window in the winter as well. And David Turnbull appears to have very clearly told Celtic he has no intention of signing a new contract at Celtic, no matter how good the offer is. And the inside stories would suggest that Turnbull was given a deal very similar to those offered to Hatate, O'Reilly, Maeda, Kyogo, etc., i.e., top level salary with a 3-4 year contract. But Turnbull seems very keen to try football elsewhere. Whether teams elsewhere will be happy to accept a player who doesn't muck in and help out in midfield or defence, um, shows a lack of fitness and a lack of energy and pace. And I feel in those cases Rodgers' assessment is correct. However, it would appear Rodgers wants a very, very firm hand in future transfers. He's looking for quality signings, although I think he may find it difficult, particularly in this upcoming winter transfer window, to sign quality players that other pundits and experts will accept as being quality players. I think quite a lot of players we've signed recently have been just called projects, but there's a very strong argument to say that Matt O'Reilly was signed by Postecoglou as a project. And it's difficult to know just how well players such as Lagerbielke, Palma, Yang, Tilio are going to turn out, as many of them haven't really had a first team run of games due to a mixture of injury, suspension, and Brendan Rodgers' rather odd assessment of some players. Just in preparation for this video, I had a wee look at Brendan Rodgers' transfer history and loan history with his last three clubs, Liverpool, Leicester and Celtic, and with the two spells of Celtic combined, although have attributed none of the signings in the recent summer transfer window to Rodgers, as a lot of those seem to be on their way in under Postecoglou's regime, with really only Phillips, Bernardo and Palmer really being Rodgers signings. However, interestingly, Rodgers signed 30 players for Liverpool, 30 players for Celtic in his first phase, and 30 players for Leicester in his years at Leicester. Doing a quick bit of analysis of the 30 players signed for Liverpool, 12 were graded as 1 out of 5 quality. For anybody who's also a Liverpool fan as well as a Celtic fan, I'm sure you could agree that Asidi, Aspas, Luis Alberto, Elori, Sissoko, Moses, Balotelli, Lambert, Markovic, Markilo, Grujic and Bogdan. Admittedly, a couple of those players did go on to much bigger and better things with other clubs, but all of them were complete duds at Liverpool. Did have a couple of really good signings at Liverpool, people such as Firmino, Coutinho, Sturridge, Origi, uh, Dejan Lovren, also good. Squad players such as Joe Gomez and James Milner. Um, but of the 30 signings, 12 were 1 out of 5s and 8 were 2 out of 5s. Not very impressive. At Celtic in his first phase, again 30 signings, 19 graded as 1 out of 5, 4 at 3 out of 5, and then the 4 out of 5s and 5 out of 5s, Scott Sinclair, Christopher Ayer, Paddy Roberts, Olivier Cham, and 2 that were down as 5 out of 5s, Dembele and Edward. However, looking at these 19 1 out of 5s, we've got players such as Kolo Toure, very, very much past his best. Doris de Vries, who was signed by Rodgers to displace Craig Gordon. Craig Gordon, one of Celtic's best goalkeepers of modern time, right up there with Fraser Forster. Many Celtic fans remember Ebi Kouassi, Benyu, Christian Gamboa, the wonderful Marvin Comper, Lewis Morgan. They went on to bigger and better things elsewhere. The complete dud loans of Charlie Masanda, Timothy Weah, and Ollie Burke. Also some names I doubt many Celtic fans will remember. Leo Mazis, Manny Perez, Yusuf Malumbo, Armstrong, Okiflex, Gutman, Chuck Tolian, Arzani, and also a couple others, Bayou and Shved, both of whom went on to bigger and better things with other teams, but were complete and utterly useless for Celtic. All of those players came into Celtic first time around under Rodgers and were useless or next to useless, and showed very, very poor judgment. And I'm reliably informed that Rodgers was very heavily involved with signings and scouting, etc., in his first period at Celtic. And I think 19 1 out of 5s and 4 2 out of 5s is an extremely poor return on Rodgers' ability to judge players. Finally, coming to Leicester, and again, Leicester, he had signed 30 players to the team, 2 graded as 4 out of 5s. That was Yossi Perez and Yuri Tielemans, both very, very good players, both very successful for a couple of years under Rodgers at Leicester. But an absolute litany of 1 out of 1 out of 10, 1 out of 5 and 2 out of 5 start players. With, if anybody cares to look at the transfer history on Wikipedia or Transfermarkt, etc., you'll see a whole string of players who never saw anything like first team action, wasted an awful lot of money on them, complete a couple of duds in Fofana and Castagnier. He spent a heck of a lot of money for Leicester and basically inherited a good squad, was successful with a cup, keeping the team in the upper echelons of the Premier League for a couple of seasons, but more and more as Rodgers took over, recruiting new players and recruiting replacements for players who moved on or retired, etc. Leicester's form and success went down and down and down, and in the end, Rodgers wasted many, many millions of pounds of Leicester money, and his final squad was the one that got relegated and is still in the Championship now, although does appear to be on its way back up to the Premiership. So the question is whether we can trust Brendan Rodgers' ability to scout and assess players' talent for coming to the club, and also which players to keep, which players to sell, which players to loan out, and which players to promote from the B team into the first team squad, and which players who are currently fringe players should really be in the team on a more and more regular basis. One thing that has disappointed me about Rodgers has been his rather extreme reluctance to ever rest and rotate players. And I think there are quite a few Celtic players at the moment looking rather tired. People such as McGregor, O'Reilly, Taylor, CCV, Scales, um, and several of which, of course, have international matches in the international breaks, as well as playing pretty much every game for Celtic. One could also argue that Kyogo has looked rather tired and not quite on full form the last 4 or 5 games, and it's a good few games since he scored for Celtic. Um, and Rodgers has been very reluctant to use O as main striker or bring on, although when he has brought on O as that main striker or as a second striker to go with Kyogo, it has borne fruit. And for me, the turnaround in form at St Johnstone at the weekend coincided with O being brought on, two up front with O'Reilly and McGregor pushing further and further forward and bringing the back four also up to the halfway line rather than them all dawdling back halfway inside their own half, marking one St Johnstone player. So, be very interesting to see your own opinions regarding Rodgers' ability to assess players already in the squad, which ones to keep, which ones to let go, which ones to promote from B team or back up into the team, and also which players he's going to try and sign in January and the summer, which could well be very important for Celtic. Looking at the 90 players he signed for Liverpool, Leicester, and Celtic, we do seem to have an awful lot of 1 star out of 5 level players, and not an awful lot of 4 star and 5 star players for those clubs in Rodgers' time. Just about finishes things off for today. As I said a wee bit earlier on in this video, going to do a Celtic v Hibs preview video tomorrow morning, prior to the fixture in the evening, which is destined to be a rather cold, freezing Glasgow night with, it's thought, a few seats, maybe a few hundred, 1,000 or so seats unoccupied, due to the evening midweek winter kickoff, and also the fact that for a lot of people money is rather tight at this time of year, and so smaller than normal number of non-season ticket holders taking up seats to support the club. For those who want to see my thoughts on what lineup Rodgers should go with, and also what lineup Rodgers will go with, there is, as I said, a wee short video in the short section that has my predicted 11 that Rodgers will go for, but also the players and formation I think that Rodgers should start with tomorrow, in view of the fact that we've got a lot of fixtures, 8 in total, up to the last game before the winter break. A lot of games, very intense, some very, very important games. And I think we do need to rest and rotate, and also get some of our, inverted commas, fringe players in. I think we're going to need them as injuries do tend to increase around the winter time. We're also going to have the Asian Cup exodus to cope with. And so I think it's important to get the fringe players in, maybe look at a couple of the B team young star players also into the squad. I think we're going to need a good number of players to get us through the first couple of months of the season. Although there's an argument to say that the return of a fully fit Dyson Maida, a fully fit Rio Hatate, and a fully fit Leah Labada would be like having 3 new signings for the start of 2024. And I think those 3 players are undoubted first choice starters. I think all 3 of them would make Celtic's team an awful lot stronger. And it also takes some of the pressure off of Kyogo, Lewis Palmer, McGregor, and O'Reilly for those other players to be available as first choice starters, and also giving some of those players a little bit of a break rather than having to start week in, week out, and having all the expectations and pressure on them every single week. So, as I say, we'll be doing another video tomorrow morning as a preview of the Hibs match. Do have a wee look at the shorts video, preview of the lineup I would recommend, but also the one I think Rodgers will go with. And so, for today, thanks for listening, thanks for watching, goodbye, and hail, hail.